Church of Sant'Ignazio de Loyola in Campo Marzio, is a Catholic place of worship in Rome, in Baroque style. It is adjacent to the Roman College of which it was the university chapel and overlooks the characteristic Piazza Sant'Ignazio. The church was built in 1626 on the ancient Church of the Annunziata, which had become too small due to the influx of students from the Roman College. Work began in 1626 and it was dedicated to Ignatius of Loyola, founder of the Society of Jesus, who had been canonized on March 12, 1622. The work's great patron was Bishop Ludovico Ludovisi, nephew of Pope Gregory XV, who had died in 1623 and had canonized Ignatius of Loyola. The building has been attributed several times to various architects, who worked in the first half of the 17th century in Rome: Domenichino, Girolamo Rainaldi, Alessandro Algardi. The majestic facade is however attributed to the latter. Cardinal Ludovisi's devotion to the company dated back to his school years, and he wanted the building, for which he immediately paid 100,000 scudi, in terms of size and beauty to be inferior to few. But his first move was not lucky. The project concerned an area close to the novitiate of Sant' Andrea, and the Pope immediately objected that the height of the new building would prevent him from seeing the Quirinal. The Cardinal thus had to move the location near the Collegio Romano, the Jesuit institute in the center of Rome. From then on it was the Jesuits themselves who created difficulties for him. The conditions of the company had changed considerably compared to the times in which it had had to passively accept the provisions of the powerful Cardinal Farnese, and Cardinal Ludovisi himself clarified that his admiration for the Jesuits was due at least in part to the power and authority they have it with almost all the Principi. Now it was his turn to personally measure himself with this power, although his activity in this regard is somewhat obscure from the vague allusions of contemporary authors. All sources agree in saying that Cardinal Ludovisi announced a competition for the appointment of the architect, and that Domenichino, a particular protege of his, was also among those who presented drawings. At this point the mystery begins. Passeri, a great friend of the artist, is strangely reticent. Domenico, among others, took part in the venture, but God knows what end he came to, and it is superfluous to speak of this. Bellori, on the other hand, is much more explicit. He says that Domenico executed several designs for Cardinal Ludovisi, but that the Jesuits later came to visit him, and told him not to get tired, because they wanted to follow the form of their Church of the Gesù, as the first and most beautiful, which had served as an example and a model for the other churches. Domenico replied that they were content with having two models, and that he would have proposed the second one, but it was all in vain. Finally the task was given to the Jesuit Father Orazio Grassi, architect, mathematician, and astronomer, famous for having been an opponent of Galileo Galilei. An 18th century note tells us that Domenichino angrily withdrew from the whole matter when Grassi combined the two designs which he had presented and which had been firmly censored by the Jesuits. The Jesuit sources, on the other hand, make no mention of Domenichino, limiting themselves to saying that it was Cardinal Ludovisi who chose Grassi's project among all those submitted to him. Evidently the pressure must have been very strong. Although Ludovisi continued, during the few years of his life that remained to him, to be interested in construction, even insisting that a commission of architects be appointed, including the painter Domenichino and Carlo Maderno, with the task of closely examining the projects of Grassi, the facts suggest that he did not exercise any real control, limiting his activity to the function of financier. One of his last acts, before his death, was to leave the company a further sum of 100,000 ducats. The new building was to serve the students of the Roman College, and not for public worship, so the decoration of the side chapels could not be entrusted to the Roman patrician families, so the Jesuits themselves had taken on the task. This being the case, it was necessary to economize, and the company thought it best to follow the usual policy in similar circumstances, resorting to one of its own members, Pierre de Ladru, of Saint Omer, who entered the novitiate of Sant' Andrea in 1626. He performed all the paintings that could be seen in the church and in the sacristy of the church at that time. He frescoed the vault of the sacristy, completed 6 paintings for the side chapels, and illusionistically painted a fake altar on the internal wall of the apse. From what little remains of his works it is not difficult to understand that he was a completely insignificant artist. In 1640, the temple was still unfinished. Once again the Jesuits saw themselves surpassed by their rivals, the Oratorians, who had two very important works executed for the subsequent developments of Baroque art, a fresco by Pietro da Cortona on the ceiling of the sacristy of their church and a building by Borromini intended to the function of library and concert hall for the performances of religious music for which they were so famous. However, as regards Grassi, he was also director of the works for a long time. He was succeeded by another Jesuit, Sasso, who continued his work, however making some changes to the original design. The facade of the church is structured on two orders, the lower and the upper. In the lower part there are three openings that allow access to the building. These doors are surmounted by curved tympanums embellished with refined festoons. In particular the central door is highlighted, flanked by two large columns with Corinthian capitals. In the upper part, aligned with the central door, there is a large window that allows light to enter the church, illuminating the nave. Also in the upper part, at the ends of both sides, note the large reversed volutes, very similar to those designed by the genius of Leon Battista Alberti for the Basilica of Santa Maria Novella in Florence. The church is well known for the quadratures of Andrea Pozzo, 1685. When you look up, standing at the point marked on the ground by a golden disc placed on the floor of the nave, you can admire the perspective simulation of a second temple, superimposed on the first, the real one of the church. This simulated architecture, in perspective from below, is divided into two orders, a lower and an upper one, and with a sinuous movement of columns, arches, and entablatures, it extends upwards where, in a light aurea, the glory of Saint Ignatius is depicted, with Christ displaying the banner of the cross. A beam of light radiates from Christ's side which illuminates Ignatius, from which in turn it branches off towards four allegorical figures around him who represent the four continents known at the time. Another mark in the floor, a little further towards the altar, marks the point for the ideal observation of a second perspective canvas, above the cross, which reproduces the image of a dome. In fact, the majestic masonry dome foreseen by the project, perhaps for economic reasons, was never built. It is also said that it was the locals who did not want a dome that was too large and would block the sun from them. In addition to these masterpieces of perspective painting, noteworthy are the 6 chapels located along the side naves which, with elegant proportion and sumptuousness, make the entire architectural structure more complete and harmonious. In the apse the scenes from the life of Sant'Ignazio are represented, painted by Andrea Pozzo between 1685 and 1688. In the center the vision of Sant'Ignazio alla Storta, in the apse basin Sant'Ignazio heals the plague victims, in the vault the defense of Pamplona, in which Ignatius was wounded. In the cap of the apse Andrea Pozzo implemented another of his perspective virtuosities. He managed to represent a fictitious architecture with 4 straight columns in a concave surface. Subsequently, between 1698 and 1701, Andrea Pozzo painted the Mission of Saint Francis Xavier in the Indies on the left wall of the apse, while on the right wall he painted Saint Ignatius welcoming Saint Francis Borgia into the Society of Jesus. The false dome in the fresco by Andrea Pozzo, 1685. Also worth mentioning are several other works of art. In the counterfacade the 2 stucco statues depicting religion and magnificence by Alessandro Algardi. In the second chapel on the right, Sacropan Chapel, designed by Nicola Michetti, the solemn altarpiece with the transit of San Giuseppe by Francesco Trevisani, the altar of the right transept, by Andrea Pozzo, with the relief of San Luigi Gonzaga by Pierre Legros, which corresponds, in the left transept, to that of the Annunziata, by Filippo Valle. On the sides of the presbytery, on the right, there is the Ludovisi Chapel with the sepulchral monument of Pope Gregory XV by Pierre Legros and 4 stucco statues with the Virtues, by Camillo Rusconi. In the corresponding space on the left, which gives access to the sacristy, there is the colossal plaster statue of Saint Ignatius, also a work by Rusconi and a model of the one made in marble for the Vatican Basilica. The bodies of several saints of the Society of Jesus are preserved in the building: Luigi Gonzaga, 3 Roberto Bellarmino, Giovanni Perchmans. Another body preserved in Sant'Ignazio is that of Father Felice Maria Capello, 1879 to 1962, Nicknamed the Confessor of Rome, Jesuit, and professor at the Pontifical Gregorian University, the cause of his beatification is open. In the church there is an organ built by the Pontifical Organ Factory Tamburini of Crema in 1935 to replace another previous one enlarged in 1905-1906 by Carlo Veggese Bossi. This organ was built in 1888 by the organ builder Pacifico Inzolai, inspired by the new Maritini organ of San Giovanni in late Reno, and had 37 registers spread over 3 keyboards and pedal board. The current instrument, located on the 2 side walls of the apse above special choir stalls with Baroque balustrades, has 3 keyboards and a concave radial pedal board and has 53 registers.